We have multiple surprising Maple Leafs updates to go over today. As ahead of the biggest game of the year against the Florida Panthers, Craig Berube has made some interesting decisions. We're going to break down those decisions, discuss what it means going forward, as well as break down some interesting updates from the side of Paul Maurice and the Florida Panthers ahead of tonight's big game. But before we get into it, if you're a part of the percentage who aren't subscribed to the channel, this is the place to be for daily Leafs content. Your guys' support has been unbelievable. If you want to help us towards our big goal of 16,000 subscribers, make sure to hit that subscribe button. And also, before we get into the video, we do want to send our condolences to the family of Greg Millen. He had an unexpected passing, so we just want to send some condolences over there. There's a lot to go over today, and the Leafs are playing a very big game tonight against the Florida Panthers, and there's a bunch of updates, and I actually want to start with the Florida Panthers side because we will dive into some of the Leafs updates and some of the interesting, unexpected moves there. But even in a more shocking turn of events, which is very rare that we're talking about the other team's lines, a ton of Florida Panthers are back tonight. Barkov, Sam Reinhart, and Gustav Forling. And there's a couple of other guys to go over as well. But this is very interesting because obviously there's been some rumblings about the Panthers intentionally tanking to try to play the Leafs, all these different things. And then in what would be the most deciding factor in that tanking game, they bring back basically every one of their players besides Sam Bennett, which we'll dive into a little bit later. But for a Leafs team that is still trying to desperately hold on to that Atlantic lead, very interesting to see Reinhart, Barkov, Forsling back. But Sam Bennett's going to be out for the remainder of the season. So as it pertains to the implications of the top of the Atlantic, this is very intriguing.
Yeah, and I don't think any team honestly wants to tank in their position that the Florida Panthers are in right now. Why would you want to tank to play the Toronto Maple Leafs? And I know everyone can make that assumption out there in the media, right? We've seen it over the last 24 hours, maybe even 48 hours that, oh, Florida's obviously tanking to play the Leafs because they know they can beat the Leafs. Why would you take that chance, right? Why wouldn't you want to play your best so you can finish first in the Atlantic if you're the Florida Panthers, which they were right there before? I don't subscribe to that. I don't think that that's the case. I don't think that Paul Maurice operates like that either. But, maybe it is the case. Maybe we don't know what's going on behind closed doors, but I don't think it is. I think that they have more pride than that. And I think that they had a bunch of guys that were dealing with injuries. And obviously, we're going to get to Sam Bennett in a second, but they have a lot of guys returning tonight. And that's going to make for a very interesting game because coming into today, I was like, this is going to be a weird game. The Leafs have almost an entirely healthy lineup. Jake McCabe's not playing and David Kampf is also not playing, but the Florida Panthers were running a borderline AHL lineup in their last game against the Ottawa Senators. So to see a bunch of guys back tonight, it's going to be a very good game. Obviously, Barkov wasn't in the lineup last time that they played the Leafs as well, just a week ago. So that's going to be fun to watch as well. So should be a good game. Obviously, we'll get into Joseph Woll as well. He is starting, which is another storyline in this one as well. But, they have a bunch of guys returning from injury. I think they're going to try and make a run. But the standings are insane right now. Tampa Bay Lightning just won again last night. So we have no idea how this is going to shape up. I mean, the Leafs could end up playing the Ottawa Senators, but it could be the 2-3 matchup instead of the 1 versus wild card. So a lot still up in the air, and this is still a big game. If you're the Leafs, go out and win this game.
Yeah, and obviously if they win, they'll secure themselves further up in the Atlantic, but also depending on how the Ottawa Senators play out, they could take over the Panthers or tie them because they're only 2 points back. So there's a ton of things happening here. As pertains to the Leafs in tonight's game, they decided to go with Joseph Woll. He's in the Leafs net at morning skate and is projected to start in goal tonight on the road against Florida. So I thought it was going to be, Stolarz or some rumblings about that because he's played, of course, that's his former team. He's played okay against them. And I believe he's played the last 3 games against the Panthers this season. So they're going to go with a different look with Joseph Woll. Of course, Stolarz did start back-to-back games. I think he is going to be the playoff game one starter. But as you look at the lines now in the morning skate today, and they didn't skate the last 2 games. So you have Nyes, Matthews, Marner. I mean, the top 6 are the same. Lawton, Domi, Yarncroc, the same there as well. Lorentz, Holmberg, Robertson. And Robertson factors back in, coming off of a 2-goal game. So this is going to be very interesting. We're coming off a game where it was arguably the most complete Leafs game of the season. They won, I believe it was 6-0. Yeah, 6-0 against the Columbus Blue Jackets, a team that, on paper may not look the best, but they were fighting for a playoff spot and still are, and they were playing very well. So for them to come in and do that is obviously great. They need to follow it up tonight. And if they can have a statement win against the Panthers without Jake McCabe, without David Kampf, it's another chance for Nick Robertson to maybe break in here and earn himself a spot in the playoff lineup on that 4th line, because that 4th line generated 2 goals in the game, a couple days ago against the Blue Jackets, but also Nick Robertson was moved up to the 3rd line for a little bit there, so it's going to be interesting to see how Craig Berube juggles that. But the big storyline here is, of course, Joseph Woll starting in net. A bit of a surprising move there.
Yeah, Joseph Woll gets a start. I don't know if it's too surprising. You just had Stolarz back to back. You can play Woll, right? Like he's playable. It's not like a backup goalie on another team where you literally can't play that goalie. Like you can play him. So Stolarz has played the majority of the games against his former team. So Woll goes tonight. I'm excited to see what he's going to be able to do. I wonder if he gets the game tonight. and another game on Saturday. Obviously, I wonder if he plays against the Montreal Canadiens. He's not going to play a back-to-back situation. I would like to see what he looks like in back-to-back games, but it looks like they're leaning more towards Stolarz anyway. But they have two back-to-backs coming up here, so you're going to see both goalies this week twice, right? I think that is pretty obvious to me. But in terms of the rest of the lineup, like you were talking about, Nick Robertson had 2 goals the other night in a game where you win 5-0 against Columbus Blue Jackets. It was a very complete game, like you said, much like, earlier in the season against the Tampa Bay Lightning. Like there's a couple of them that you can pick out this year, and he's adding some goal scoring to the fourth line, but then he was moved up to the third line, and nothing is set in stone right now. We don't know what's up with David Camp. We don't know how serious that injury is, right? Obviously, it looks like he should return before the playoffs, but a lot of these guys are fighting for their last chance here to make this lineup. I think Scott Laughton is going to be in the lineup on the third line. Max Domi isn't going anywhere, but where does Calle Yarncroke fit in? Where does Nick Robertson fit in? Are they even in the lineup, right? They're still fighting for that positioning right now. And, I think Craig Berube is thinking, does it even make sense to have Robertson on the fourth line? Well, it worked the other night, but it was Columbus, right? So they're still trying to figure out exactly how this is going to look. And they're going to be messing with things the next couple of days as well, because obviously you're playing some pretty good teams. Tampa Bay tomorrow, right? Obviously Florida tonight, playing Montreal, Carolina on the weekend. So some good teams there. So it's going to be interesting to see what they end up falling on and who kind of moves up and down the lineup. But I am looking at Robertson. How do you bounce back after that performance? Does he score tonight? Even if you don't score, how do you look in the game, right? Yarncroke, I think, is still over Robertson just based on the rest of his game. So it's going to be interesting to see, what they do the rest of the way. But one thing's for sure, they need Jake McCabe back and healthy for the playoffs.
Yeah, and also Max Pacioretty, assuming he's going to be returning for the playoffs, you have to choose between them. And of course, if David Camp comes back healthy, you also have to choose between them as well. And you can see some of the rumblings about a bunch of different things surrounding the Panthers and the standings and the seeding. Florida are losing to get to the Leafs implies Florida thinks the Leafs are bad, but to hold off to have there's a bunch of different things that are going on. At the end of the day, if Florida is tanking intentionally to get to of course the Leafs, I guess, in the first round, that would be a very interesting decision from them. It would mean they find the Tampa Bay Lightning more difficult than the Leafs, which is fair, to be honest, if they're trying to do that. But I ultimately just think Florida's been playing really bad hockey. And if you're the Leafs, like I mentioned a million times, you have to get through them anyway. You can see this here from Craig Berube. Makes you want to run through a wall a little bit. Skate, be physical, play effing hard, win your effing battles. Behind the scenes look at Berube's pregame speech before the Leafs' huge game versus Colorado a few weeks ago. I can't even imagine what it's going to be like in the playoffs. I think that's why they've been playing as good. Gives me chills thinking about the playoffs, which is now 1 week-ish away, a bit over a week. April 19th, it's a tentative date there. Things are looking very, very good for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and it's going to be exciting to see how they actually, turn out here and play. And speaking of, I also want to, speaking of Craig Berube comments, I also want to dive into Matthew Nyes and his comments there. He's playing playoff hockey, that's for sure, with how heavy he's playing, skating, being physical, and just on top of things. He's been playing extremely well for the last couple of weeks, and he's preparing himself for playoff Nyes, which is something we saw last year, and ultimately it's going to be a very interesting next few games. Any thoughts on this before we wrap up? We're in the home stretch now, only a few games left, and 2 back-to-backs will make these last few games of the season fly by.
Yeah, it is, and it's going to be very interesting to see what happens this weekend heading into next week. We're a week and a half away from the playoffs. That's really exciting, and it's kind of all coming together at the right time for the Leafs too. I think they're playing really well, and a lot of guys have locked in after those losses to Nashville and San Jose, and even before that, like they've been playing well even before that, right? So those 2 losses were a little concerning because if as a Leafs fan you look at it and you go, why are you losing to teams like this? Are you going to find success in the playoffs? Some of the bad habits are creeping back in. But since then, they've been playing very well. And I liked the game Saturday. I liked a couple of the games last week. You went in, you got the job done. It was business, right? It was business as usual. So I do like that. So I'm excited for the playoffs. They got to take care of business. But I also think if you're the Florida Panthers tanking to play the Leafs, I don't know. I would, if that is the case, I would take offense to that if I was the Leafs.
Yeah, let us know below your thoughts around that. Of course, all of the updates we have for you all as per usual. With that, I'll wrap it up. Thank you guys for watching. See you later.